So I saw all this hubbubaloo about Fallout 76. Apparently it has or had glitches. I played Fallout 4 for about 62 hours, but obviously I play a highly modified version, higher damage scaling and smarter AI and reduced loot to simulate a actual post-apocalyptic world that got picked over. And I never bothered with Fallout 76 because I'm not interested in playing Bullet Sponge Simulator with just mindlessly charging bots to soak up hits. And there's a ton of mods that I have that make the game just so much better. And the most important is improving the enemy AI. I can have the AI be smart. They don't charge in. They don't do slotting. They spread out. They take over. They blink away at the player. Damage is scaled up so every shot counts. If I get caught out and the AI has a beat on me, I'm dead. It makes another mod, Minutemen Takeover of Nuka World, necessary and makes that grand battle actually touch and go because my other mods make it basically impossible to solo open season. And compare all this to fighting dragons or whatever gay shit this is. Oh, it's a scorch beast. No, it's a lag beast and a bullet sponge. Oh, but it's from Fallout 1. Okay, those games were really bad, which is why nobody plays them. Nobody cares, because those games were actually really terrible. And if they were released today, everyone would say, why can't I get past the Temple of Ants and game mechanics? But all the mods for Fallout 4 are free. You buy the base game, you pay for the real heavy lifting for the base game, but all like the symbol manipulation, changing spawns, weapon stats, modifiers, all that's free. Sometimes a modder will even go so far as to have a new skin on something. But all these are little garnishes draped over the base game. And you can take some model or some skin that some person made and modify the stats to it. Right? It's all symbol manipulation, and it's all very easy to do because you're not dealing with the basic code of combat and NPC pathing and nav meshing and all that stuff. Now, what happens in a lot of games, such as EA's Soccer Loser FIFA series or whatever, or Candy Crush or World of Warcraft or World of Tanks, is the company, they make piles of cash from symbol manipulation. They put you in a system, and that's the biggest upfront cost and the biggest challenge, to get someone who's not already hooked to get his head inside of your little system, to get him learning about your system's mechanics and trying to succeed at the tasks you've devised for him using the rules of the game you've made. To make him playing your game, now he's in your little box. And once he's in there, once he's in this little box, now you can start going to work on him, making him pay for symbol manipulations for the game he's playing within your little box. Now, video game addiction is like cocaine addiction, and there's studies showing that this is true. But frankly, this really shouldn't be some profound finding because cocaine causes your brain to release dopamine, which is the feeling you get when you succeed at something. So you feel like you're on top of the world because you feel like you succeeded at something. And so you end up feeling like you accomplished something when all you did was snort up some powder. Or you feel like you accomplished something when all you really did was move around your mouse and press buttons on the keyboard. But okay, most people's lives are boring. Most people are boring. Most people aren't actually having real accomplishment in the real worlds, and they don't do anything meaningful with their lives. So whatever, play games. And so they get the dopamine hit from doing well in the game. That's fine. Now, in the olden days, there were some really, really long games. Fair enough. As a rule, games were shorter in the past, but, you can point to some very long games from the past. RPGs especially. And RPGs really hooked into this kind of symbol manipulation. artificial achievement, dopamine style thing. What I'll call Skinner box gameplay. I don't know if this is the correct term for it or whatever, but that's what I'm going with here. The RPG grind is one of the earliest examples of what most people think of with Skinner box gameplay, and it's kind of an artifice. It's just numbers on a screen. You're not getting even better at, say, timing jumps or shooty. Like when you get better at Doom, it's because you're getting better at manipulating the mouse and the keyboard in such a way that your guy kills the demons, right? But in an RPG, you're literally just doing repetitive action and the numbers pop up on the screen, right? You're literally just repeating a task to make a little number value tick up. So they have a base game, the RPG base game, Final Fantasy, whatever, but you feel achievement by just these little numbers going up and down. And it's the same thing with World of Warcraft. These little numbers go up and down. You get a dopamine hit from doing lots of quote-unquote damage to a hard enemy, getting that text in the box saying you're the hero who saved the day. So the old RPGs on the NES, Super NES, PlayStations, they did hook into this kind of Skinner box gameplay that I'm talking about. You know, Doom is not like this, primarily. Yeah, there are power-ups in Doom, but Doom isn't about collecting stuff to statistically level up your character. In Doom, you can complete every level in the game from a pistol start. Or take what was a popular game in the past, a popular PlayStation game, Twisted Metal. Every match starts with your vehicle with no stat upgrades. You can't get super booster engines or whatever going through the levels. You got your vehicle, and you can get weapons within the match, but you know how well you do in the game going forward is based on you getting better at the game. You can get better at the game, but that's you getting better at the game. It's not symbol manipulation that you get from the game developer. You don't get to kill 10 cars and then you get more armor as a result of that or something. And the fun in a game like Twisted Metal is based on actually driving around, actually shooting and jumping off ramps and stuff. It's something that's actually fun within the game itself. Let me put it another way. You can show someone Twisted Metal or Doom or Halo gameplay, and you could show this to someone who has never played a video game before, and they will immediately understand why someone would find it fun. If you showed them a turn-based RPG, someone who had never played a game before, they would be confused, and they would wonder why anyone would find that fun, why they would play that for fun. However, game companies weren't monetizing the addiction at this point because they had basically no means to. Sure, people would get hooked into that kind of Skinner box RPG gameplay, right? And that's what you notice is kind of a relation between RPG elements and Skinner box gameplay. And so they would get hooked into this, and as a result, they would buy the next full game. They would buy all the Final Fantasy games, all the Secret of Mana games, I guess. I don't know what the old RPG series were. But they weren't selling people stat upgrades or skins. They weren't charging them $10 for a new sword when an entire game costs $50. I'm sure there's some smart guy who knows about some microtransactions before the internet, other than what I'm going to talk about. But before the internet, this was almost non-existent. Pre-internet microtransactions obviously were a lot less, and while I was just a wee lad, I had no idea such things even existed. That said, there is a pre-internet example of Skinner box gameplay plus microtransactions, and that is card games. And I'm specifically thinking about the Magic the Gathering card games. The cringe lore title, Magic the Gathering. It's gathering something. And before you get butt mad, what do these games do? Well, they get you hooked into a system. Maybe you go to a game shop where they'll be more than happy to teach you how to play. In fact, they'll do it for free a lot of the times. It's free to play, right? For the first time, at least. Heck, if the company itself is sponsoring it, they may just give you a starter pack because it costs them virtually nothing to print one additional pack to give away, meaning that it costs a lot to set up a printing and lamination line to begin to mass produce all these cards. So it's expensive to have the whole operation going. But the cost of printing one additional deck, one additional pack, once you have the whole thing set up, is virtually nothing. I was a wee lad at the time, but now I realize why they did this. They want you hooked into the system. And giving away a pack of cards, you're more likely to get someone hooked into the game, because the cards themselves have a marginal cost of virtually zero. So if they give you one pack, say it costs them 10 cents to make that, and this has a 1 in 100 chance of making you a regular Magic player, and the average Magic player spends $100, well, they're spending 10 cents to make on average $1. And that's not counting the possibility that you could draw some of your friends in. And on top of this, they were doing loot boxes IRL long before online gaming really existed. Sometimes you could go to an independent store and buy the card that you want, but Wizards of the Coast figured something out. They can milk more money out of you morons by making you buy loot boxes, or making you have to buy these cards in these randomized packs. Who knows what you're going to get? It adds to the excitement or whatever. And because you want the golden symbol manipulation image, not the silver symbol manipulation, not the bronze symbol manipulation, you want the level 4 druid cloak or whatever, you end up buying a bunch of packs with cards you don't want, and so you end up paying more, and Wizards of the Coast can justify it by saying, look at how many cards you got. You got 100 cards in all those packs, knowing full well that you didn't actually want any of them. You just wanted the golden Dawn silver wizard cloak or whatever. It's the whole loot box scam. Again, pre-internet. Not even pre-internet. They weren't even using computers for this. And so you get hooked into a system. Magic the Gathering, right? Get your dopamine release hooked onto how good you do in their stupid little game. And once you're in there, once you're in the magic box, right, now you're in the magic box, now they are the only ones who can sell you additional dopamine hits in the form of little pieces of paper with numbers and effects scribbled on them. Can you see how this can be pretty lucrative, right? All they have to do to sell you another dopamine hit is just a little strip of paper with the cards. And yeah, they have artists and they look nice and all that stuff. But you got one guy draw the thing and then you print off 100,000 of them. Okay, so it's not like you're buying like original art or anything. Okay, so it's super cheap to produce each one. You're in their little Skinner box, their magic box, and then they just monetize your addiction. Hey Timmy, I know you like the magic cards, so Mr. Richards, who runs a printing press, made you some. It has his own artwork, and if you want, you can change some of the numbers. He doesn't know what mana means.
No, Mom! It has to be from Wizards of the Coast!
Why? Why does it have to be from this company?
Because that's the rules! These are fake cards! They're not real!
No, they're real. See, they're the same size. They're made of cardstock, and the pictures here, they're just as nice as the ones in your...
But it's not a real magic card! It's not tournament legal!
I don't know what that... What tournaments are you talking about?
Mom, you don't understand! It has to be the $20 pack at the grocery store, and you can only buy it from Wizards of the Coast!
Transitioning into the digital age, you have Pokemon having probably the most egregious example of Skinnerbox gameplay at the time for any video game. Now, this is pre-internet, or at least pre-good internet. This was the age of AOL keywords. And with Pokemon, they had clearly designed Skinnerbox RPG gaming, much more egregious than any of the other JRPGs. Because you're literally running around collecting all the animals, and they're pretty overt about this. Gotta catch them all, which even when I was a wee lad, I thought that was a very dubious slogan, gotta catch 'em all. That sounded really, yeah. I mean, games like Final Fantasy and Chrono Trigger, they tried to have some strategy involved with multiple parties and turns, and so they tried to turn the grind of the RPG into something like a game. Pokemon was unapologetically simplistic, with your ability being almost entirely a function of the Pikamon's you managed to collect. Right, the Final Fantasy games, yeah, they tried. It's fundamentally a Skinner box game, but they tried to create some strategy. Okay, you put the debuffs on before you attack, or you only attack when he's poking his head out, or you have to have a mage and the healer, and this character does this, and this character's in the front row, this character's in the back row. So they're Square's trying to put some strategy into a Skinner box gameplay. They're trying to make a Skinner box game into something that's not quite a Skinner box the game, right? They're trying to create, they're trying to do something, right? But Pokemon just doesn't give a shit. It's you got one Pikamans, the other Pikamans, and who wins is basically who has the better Pikamans, and that's it. There's almost no strategy going on. This is a pure Skinner box. The first Pikaman video game was released in February 1996. The card game was released in October of 1996. So it seems to be pretty clear that they plan to release the card game when they launched the video game. You get hooked into the system with their video games, and then they parlay that into the card game. So Game Freak was trying to monetize addiction before internet gameplay existed, and they did it with cards, just like Magic was doing. They had a Skinnerbox video game, a very egregious and clearly Skinnerbox video game, to get you hooked into their system, and then you could buy a microtransaction in the form of slips of paper. Right? You could buy the little Pokemon, the official Pikaman cards. And of course, they sold multiple versions of the same video game as well. Pokemon Blue and Red and Yellow and Green and Pokemon Taupe, to get people to buy the same game over and over and over again. A game that wasn't really even a game in the first place, because you got to catch them all. And in Pokemon, in Pokemon Magenta, you can get the Muse or whatever, and you can't get the Muse in the Pokemon Yellow, so you got to buy this color of the cartridge. It's almost the same game, but this area is a little bit different, right? And so even then, even within the video games itself, they had just little symbol manipulation to get you to buy more of basically the same game. Game Freak was just scamming every way they could. If it came out today, everyone would see this for exactly what it is, and I think Pokemon would get nowhere. Because when a new, microtransaction Skinnerbox game comes out today, it kind of gets called out for what it is. They make a little bit of money, but they don't go viral in the way Pokemon did. The Game Freak did their thing at the right time, and Candy Crush did their thing at the right time. I don't think today they could replicate what they're doing. It was the mid-1990s when Pokemon came out. There was no skepticism toward or understanding of the kind of digital cocaine that Pokemon is. And you're getting little kids hooked onto this, what is essentially digital cocaine. No doubt other companies saw just how much cash Game Freak was raking in, doing so little work, producing a small amount of content. So they got your video game, they got you playing the card game with your friends, they got you watching their TV show, which you never would have watched if it wasn't the Pokemon brand, that you're hooked into now. So you got all the Pokemon going on, and Pika Pika, you little shit stain, go get your parents' money to buy more Pokecrap. So this is where freedom and rights become a bugaboo and start to break down. Because what you're talking about with this stuff it's a kind of chemical slavery. The money that you have, it's all a product of someone's labor. Even if you're literally buying wood from a lumberjack, you're not paying the tree. You're not paying the mountain for the ore that came out of the mountain. You're paying the people who cut down the tree, who mine the ore. You're paying people. And certainly any transformation of those resources into things like computers and cars and clothes, you're paying people who made all that. So all money is, in a sense, a claim to labor, right? Because it all goes to people. It all comes from people. And this isn't some flippant thing. It's not just, oh, money comes from people. Okay, here's my labor value. Take it. I'm going to go take a nap. No, it's you. You have to do the thing to get those Federal Reserve notes. You are selling away your happiness. You are selling away your free will and, in a sense, sort of enslaving yourself to get those Federal Reserve notes, right? To get claims to other people's labor. And if someone else gets to decide what you must pay to get your next dopamine hit, well, how free are you? You have to pay this one person money or else you'll feel shitty. Well, you're free to feel miserable, I guess. And sure, and I guess if a slave doesn't work, okay, well, I guess he's free to be put in solitary. I know, the analogy is not 100% the same. When you compare things that are similar but not identical, so as to point out similarities in their relevant aspects, the fact that those things aren't identical is not a refutation of the comparison of the relevant aspects. Okay, if two things were precisely identical, then there'd be no point to ever making an analogy because they would be obviously the same, right? I get that, right? So people who don't like analogies because the things aren't identical, point taken, we're moving on. Yes, chattel slavery and chemical addiction are not identical. The point is, it's an exploitative power relation in the sense that you're giving over your real labor for some bullshit skin, weapons mod, or other symbol manipulation that took them all of 2 seconds to make when it's divided among how many people who bought it. We have laws against undue influence, mainly directed against cults, and laws against contracts under duress, and laws prohibiting the exploitation of minors. In the same vein, there are laws against certain substances that were made because they put a person in a compromised state where their ability to negotiate is radically nerfed. But that's something that makes these Skinner box microtransaction combos even more disgusting than controlled substances. A controlled substance like cocaine, in principle, if it wasn't outlawed, anyone could make it. Anyone could grow marijuana. So at least there's some competition. You could go to another marijuana dealer. And if you really wanted, you could grow marijuana yourself. Now, it's going to fuck you up because it's going to cause you to release a bunch of, in the case of cocaine, dopamine, marijuana, other things. But your brain eventually adapts to where you eventually begin to need those drugs to just get the sort of basic baseline levels of those hits. And so it doesn't make you happier in the long run. But in principle, even with those things, as destructive as those are, you could at least grow them yourselves, or you could buy from another dealer, because they're substances, they're plants, anyone can grow them. But this is not the case with the Skinner box video game addiction when you're dealing in a country that respects IP and copyright law. Once you're hooked into one of these companies' boxes, they got you, and you can only get a hit from them. Right? Because they got you hooked, because your mind is hooked into that game system and those game mechanics. And so they have their little monopolies. And it's so lucrative that companies are increasingly just not even charging for the base game anymore. Because charging for the base game is a barrier to getting people in their little box, right? They want you in the box, buying their little symbol manipulations, buying a retextured rifle with a number on a spreadsheet change to increase the damage. This was done in like an hour, and you, along with thousands of others, will spend $5 on that. And so they make $100,000 on an hour of work for like a rifle skin. Once they've made the base game, that's the real heavy lifting, that's the real effort. But once they get you hooked into this free-to-play base game, then they can start selling, things that cost almost nothing to make for $10 a pop. They're not providing any actual value to you at this point. This isn't content. A $10 skin isn't really content. Let's be real here. So sure, when they paint a gun and have some knife skin, yeah, technically they're doing something, but it's like you spend $60 on an entire game and tens of thousands on textured objects versus $10 on a single textured object, you're virtually paying for nothing in these microtransactions. It's a little symbol manipulation, and it's just they're monetizing an addiction for virtually nothing on their end. And unlike the cocaine dealer, they don't have to actually grow anything once you're in. They have an infinite supply of these microtransaction items. They have a total monopoly on them. Now, I don't think these companies are worse than heroin dealers, but they're absolutely worse than cocaine dealers in principle. Now, in practice, because cocaine is illegal and microtransactions are legal, you're going to get really nasty people in the cocaine market. You're going to get more psychopaths in the cocaine market, whereas the people doing microtransactions are more likely to just be, computer programmers who aren't really aware of how rotten their work is. Right? Whereas people who engage in the black market and illegal activities tend to be, morally dubious generally. But that's not something inherent to buying and selling cocaine. That's something inherent to operating in an illegal market. But in principle, the microtransaction relation is certainly much more exploitative. It's a much more exploitative power dynamic than cocaine is, at least. Heroin, I think, is still worse. But you see politicians, especially older politicians, for whom this is not normal, and they see the effects of these Skinner box games that they have on people, and they try to deal with it in the way they would for anything this destructive. You see older people looking at these games and they say, this is terrible. This is like a drug addiction. Now, which is worth more, a pound of vegetables or a pound of cocaine? And this is where, I get sort of tired of like free market peoples. The idea of private property, the idea that you can, within reason, buy and sell whatever you want to whoever you want, that you can buy land and stuff and just start making shoes or cars or candles or guns. This idea, this arrangement that people are in, this is not the natural state of human affairs. In the West, we call the natural state of human affairs feudalism, but that's just the name it was given in Europe. It's really just the global traditional economy that humans have always had. It's like if you asked a kid how to organize a town, like a 12-year-old kid, he'd go, oh, let's have Billy make bread. He's good at that. Oh, and let's have Sarah make clothes. And, oh, let's have James make the shoes. So everyone has their little role in the group. And you couldn't just buy and sell at whatever price you wanted because you were all in it together. You bought shoes from James at the price that James could live off of. And he would buy the inputs for those shoes at set prices, and all the prices were regulated by the designated markets and fairs. The market at the time wasn't some abstract thing like what people mean today when they say the market. They had hard physical locations. These markets had security. They had courtrooms and jailhouses, and they had a guy who was like the governor of the market. And you couldn't necessarily bring in grain from hundreds of miles away. You'd have to be approved on what you could sell and at what price. First in England and then in the Low Countries and later everywhere else, they started to change property law and they started to change market law to where anyone could sell anything to anyone in the whole of England, for example. So now you could produce something in Kent and sell it in Manchester, and that then resulted in factories. I'm talking long before steam engines. I'm just talking about primitive assembly lines and specialization, which even absent, the steam engine or any other technological improvement, that alone would often double or triple production just by being able to organize it in a mass production way, in a sort of primitive assembly line. Simply the organization allowed by a common market or free market in England, meaning you could buy and sell anywhere in England and you were not regulated by local markets and fairs. This alone increased the production of stuff in England multiple times by allowing for mass production of, say, shoes that could then be sold throughout the entirety of England, not just in your local market. And from here, It's easy to see how this would ultimately lead to steam-powered mass production. But for this to be possible, firms must be allowed to form from the investments of more than one person now, because these companies aren't just family-owned shops anymore. These are big operations. So this then resulted in corporations. And these corporations had to be able to buy land. And so the law on land ownership had to be changed to where it was no longer purely a state title, meaning that the lords could sell their hereditary land titles, sometimes stretching back over 1,000 years, to people with money, to merchants. And so, which is to say, the creation of private property in this way. But the thing is, all of this was enforced by the state. The notion that the old lords owned the land was an idea enforced by the state. Although in the sense, the lords and the state were sort of one and the same. The notion that a corporation owns anything, that a corporation even exists, is like money itself, but that's another topic for another time. That's just an idea, okay? The idea that Obsidian or Nintendo exists, that's just an idea that's enforced by state law. And it's an idea that is not emergent. It didn't just happen. It was a conscious decision by the state based on the experience that the firm was radically more effective at increasing production of stuff than either the nobility or crown ventures, which is to say central planning, or what they called central planning back then. But the firms don't care fundamentally about increasing the production of stuff that you and I benefit from. All they care about is getting money, right? They getting those claims to labor. Now, this is fine so long as they're making money, getting claims to labor is done by producing stuff that's good for society, right? That makes everyone else better off. But if you're producing cocaine, but what happens when firms make a pile of cash by making their customers miserable addicts? They're not providing value when they sell you a bunch of cocaine, or worse, microtransactions on a free-to-play game. Yeah, they're getting a bunch of labor notes coming in, but they're not actually producing anything. They're just, they're just plugging in a little number on a spreadsheet, or having like 5 minutes in Photoshop to create a new skin for a knife or something. Right? They're not actually providing value. Right? What they're doing is they're exploiting addicts that they put in their Skinner box to get claims on your labor, to get those labor notes. And I'm sorry, that wasn't part of the deal. That's not the reason we have firms. That's not the reason we have private property. That wasn't the reason for, the creation of common markets, free markets, and dare I say the C word, capitalism. That's not the reason we constructed a system of private property and common markets. It wasn't so that you could chemically enslave a bunch of people while providing almost nothing of value in return. So the question, which is more valuable, a pound of vegetables or a pound of cocaine? Well, cocaine is definitely better at transferring other people's labor to you. You get someone hooked on the cocaine and they keep coming back to you, giving you their money. And some idiot economist can look at a society where money's flying around, where people are buying a bunch of cocaine, and they can go, wow, that economy's booming. Look at how much value is being generated in this economy because there's all this cocaine flying around. And so they imagine, there's all sorts of beneficial exchange going on. No, this is not actually beneficial exchange. This is not a farmer selling his grain and milk and eggs at a marketplace. That's beneficial exchange, okay? Because you benefit from that food, and that's going to make you happier in the long run. That's going to increase the amount of dopamine that exists in your brain, whereas the drug is going to give you a little bit of a high, but eventually you're going to come down, and you're not going to be any happier in the long run. And so an economist could look at this and look at the quiet town that's growing, vegetables and building affordable housing for everyone, and everyone has enough to eat, has a healthy diet and exercise and all that stuff. And the economist could look at this little town and go, "Oh, they're so poor and they're stagnating," whereas this town is rich because drugs are flowing everywhere. There's big economy numbers going on. That's where so many people, they just get their heads lost in the finances. Right? And they think, this company's making money, good for them. Like, no, No, because they're not actually they're engaging in kind of an exploit of an economy, right? They're subverting the original purpose for a market economy in the first place, you know. And at some point, however, some politicians realized that heroin did not add value to society, that people making money by selling heroin were not benefiting society in the same way as people selling beef or cars or power tools were benefiting society. Now, with these video games, there's obviously a difference between the kind of quality game that is wildly fun to play, in which you never feel like you have to play, you know, unless you're a competitive player, you may feel like you have to play, but you don't feel like you have to play this to get to the next level or any of that crap, right? Games like GoldenEye, Twisted Metal, Smash Brothers, these they charge once for the game, or at least did, and when you beat it, it's done. Or you play with your friends, right? It's not a single player Skinner box game that goes on forever where you collect all the Pika Men, right? And it doesn't charge you for hats or paint or premium weapons. Okay, they're more like traditional entertainment. In fact, they actually games have the ability to be much better than traditional entertainment because you're in the movie. And I think the actual game developers, the people who actually make the games, you know, they don't want to make Skinner boxes. They don't want to monetize addiction, right? Because these people who make games, they love games, right? It's an art to them. It's like people who make film love films, and they don't, you know, they don't want to make trash, right? Which is why early on in video game development, you didn't see nearly as much of this stuff. But as more and more traditional business people started to get involved in game development, right? More, you know, corporate adults, you know, the kind of person, the really responsible person, the responsible corporate adult who's responsible to the shareholders, right? They're just interested in the money. And it's no mistake that you see companies begin to move in this direction. They not only turn franchises into Skinner box microtransaction systems, they also wreck the franchises because not only do these corporate adults not understand the games they're working with, but the corporate adult types tend to be just kind of shitty people anyway. And so what they like is going to be different from what like normal people like who are not like them. You know, and they have no respect for the property. You know, they just see it as, you know, something to make money on. You know, it's sort of like watching a dog you raised from a pup, you know, get bought by some bankers who then stuff your dog into a pen and hook it up to a milking machine or something, right? And then they get mad that the dog isn't producing enough milk, and then they throw it out all dried up. So, well, I guess this dog isn't any use. Let's throw it out, right? And that's what's happening to Fallout 76. And people are like horrified, like, what is going on? What's happening to Fallout 76? And there's other people who can trace the nuts and bolts and what's happening with Bethesda, but apparently there's like ZeniMax, and then there's some other company that bought ZeniMax or bought Bethesda. There's some other company, and they're just like an investment company. They're not a video game company. They're corporate adults. And I believe in the 1980s there was a term called corporate raiders. What they would do is they would go to a company that's beloved by a lot of people, and then they would just kind of fuck it over. They would strip its assets, you know, try to bilk as much cash out of the company, destroy the goodwill that the company had made for a quick buck, and then they would, you know, after sucking it dry, then, you know, liquidate the assets. And that's what sort of seems to be happening with the Fallout franchise, right? You got corporate raiders. Fallout is being raided by corporate raiders here, and now you get to pay, you know, $20 or whatever for, you know, unlimited storage in your storage chest, or you get to pay like $20 for like LARPer, like shitty New Vegas skin, which looks terrible. And not because it's a bad model, but because New Vegas is a bad game. But the thing is, you can get that shitty looking skin in Fallout 4 for free. like that's what's so hilarious about this. It's like in a traditional single player game, all this stuff is free. I think on a final note here that I want to squeeze in here is a lot of the console stuff. And this is something I didn't really think of until I played a game that was released both on console and PC. And seeing people post comments about how a lot of the mods don't work on console. Like they're on Reddit saying, well, this is a neat mod, but can you bring it over to console, please? Can you put it on the Xbox? Or how a mod that looked cool didn't get approved by Bethesda, and so you can't run it on Xbox. So basically, Bethesda says, oh, there's a person who made this really cool thing that you'd like to have in your game, but guess what? Fuck you, because we don't want you to have this. Now, Fallout 4 wasn't egregious with microtransactions, but even they were already, even with Fallout 4, you were already beginning to see why console gaming is bad, right? Because apparently there are people with the console who have to buy stuff to have it in their game. They have to buy these microtransactions to have it in their game. And this can work with a console because you're in a walled garden. I saw people comment about how horrible outdoor urban environments looked in Fallout 4. Well, PC gamers, just installed an optimized texture pack that compressed faraway textures better and dynamically removed fog and mist and simplified shadows. I mean, pretty picture is nice, but I don't want a pretty slideshow. Okay, you got to have those fucking frames. And you can have all these optimizations on PC with all these mods, but on console, you're fucked. Because Bethesda won't approve a mod that highlights how shitty Bethesda was at optimizing the textures. And a lot of these modders, frankly, they do the work to get it on PC. They just can't be arsed to get it on Xbox. It's a pain. And why? Look, if you don't want to be treated like a child, get a PC. Consoles are for chumps. Now, for a traditional single-player PC game, you can just mod forever for free. You can pull up the files, someone will make an editor, and you can just go wild tweaking the game however you want. Adding in all the skins and adding in the flaming neon dildo launchers you'd ever want. But for consoles, well, you're limited to what, Bethesda or Microturd allows, and the developer can charge for that stuff. Fallout 76 has that New Vegas Ranger skin. Looks terrible, but they can charge for it. Whereas on Fallout 4, it's free because it's a single-player PC game. So you get it for free if you're playing Fallout 4, a single player PC game. But if you're in one of these walled garden systems, maybe you're playing on Xbox, or maybe you're playing an online only game, you're in some sort of walled garden. Now you have to pay for what they tell you have to pay for. In the olden days, there was a law, or there were laws against the creation of company stores. Company stores were outlawed. Because what a company would do is they would pay workers not in Federal Reserve notes, but in some sort of bullshit bucks, right? And these bullshit bucks you could only spend at a company store. Because guess what? Nobody else wanted bullshit bucks, right? Nobody else wanted Atoms or World of Warcraft gold or any of that crap. They want Federal Reserve notes. But this was outlawed because it was seen as an exploitative system. And yet that kind of thing is being done in walled garden video games. And they can only do it if you're playing in a walled garden. And if you're playing on a console, that makes it a lot easier for them to force you to use their bullshit bucks, to force you to buy things that should be free, to force you to buy symbol manipulations. Now, if you're a developer and you have a choice, make a game where people pay just for the base game, right? This little section here, and they then get all the mods and skins they'd ever want because they can just mod the game themselves and, find other modders to get the mods that they want. Or do we put it on a console and charge for all this stuff? And this is fundamentally why consoles are cancer. Because they got all you idiot whales on your idiot boxes, causing devs to divert resources from PC to focus on console because they can screw you over with microtransactions better on console than they can on PC. And this is why, when you're playing on console, you're enabling this. You're pushing developers in this direction. You're encouraging this kind of bad behavior. You're saying, hey, fuck me over. I'm a dumb whale because I bought a console instead of a PC. And I'm reminded of this stupid little ad that was around, I think in the mid to late 2000s with the smileys. You could click on this thing and download all like the smiley emojis you wanted. Now, of course, it was packed with all sorts of spyware and malware to right. That was really what they wanted. But they advertised it as free smileys, free mouse cursors, free whatever. And the thing is, when your mouse went over the ad, this was at the age of like automatic flash pop-ups of intrusive ads and crap. When you moused your mouse over the ad, it would make the sound that went, hello, hello. And I know a bunch of you know what I'm talking about. And it was annoying as a thing that's really annoying. But the reason they're able to do that is because there were some idiots that would click on that ad and download all the smileys. And then they would wonder, hey, why are all my accounts compromised or whatever, right? They would download all the stupid smileys. And because enough people clicked on that, that made it profitable for them to continue running that ad. And so responsible people, like me, in this context, I'm responsible enough not to click on a stupid smiley emoji ad. You know, we would have to hear the hello, hello ad, you know, when we're just trying to, you know, do whatever it is I was doing. So that's what consoles are like. With people who buy consoles, it's like they're, you know, all this market that would be in PC, that would be forcing developers to make, you know, quality single player games, and, you know, and that's it. You know, you got the base games, but you don't get to charge for all the 1,000,001 little minutiae symbol manipulations. Instead of pushing developers into that, frankly, more responsible and more value-added behavior, where the money that they get isn't from monetizing addiction, it's from providing some real value to people. They become, instead of making them like vegetable farmers, console gamers make it easier for these game developers to become more like cocaine dealers. And that's sort of why consoles are cancerous. In addition, it's also just a scam to you to use consoles. It's a real stupid thing to do. Don't buy consoles. It's irresponsible, and it's making life difficult for the more responsible people. Anyway, at the end of this video, like, maybe I should have some witty conclusion, some witty line to end this, but I really don't. I just sort of had a general outline saying the things I wanted to say about this topic, about video games and microtransactions and how they're kind of like drugs, and that's bad, and also consoles enablers. Also, like, mobile crap. Don't buy mobile crap. Don't do the mobile, because that's another walled garden. Mobile games are just why. Anyway, that's all.